I don't have an agenda, but I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Do you have a motion to approve the agenda? I think that's first.
Approve the executive session agenda.
Oh, no, we got to go.
We gotta do the regular.
Regular
I'll
agenda.
move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right.
I'll also motion we recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel and legal matters.
All right, all those in favor, roll call please, Sharon.
Mr. Addison?
Yes.
Mrs. Dubin?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Lynn Nivens? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Dr. Stricker?
Yes.
All right, we will return promptly at 7. A few minutes late returning. At this time, please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, we have our first opportunity for public comments. The school board welcomes questions, ideas, and comments from persons in attendance. Members of the audience may comment during the public comment portion of the meeting when recognized by the board president. We ask that comments be limited to 3 minutes in order to complete the agenda within a reasonable time. We also ask that comments begin by providing your name, address, and the school district in which you reside. Would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? Please come forward. Killing me with that sweatshirt, Mr.
Yeah, sorry, I'm dressed this way. I was out playing a little basketball. Done my fun. Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. I'm here to make a comment, a different comment than the school safety issue. This is about Greg Miller and the opportunity, in my mind, for the district to finally bury the hatchet, take the high road, and do the right thing. Greg Miller is stepping down from City Council on April the 3rd. I think we have a deadline. 4 years ago, in 2014, everybody knows what happened with S&W. S&W, big push by the district. Greg started and kind of led, and he was a catalyst for the Spend Wisely campaign, which was the opposition. It was very divisive. Words were shared back and forth. S&W, as everybody knows, was defeated handily, and it was a bitter defeat. A little while later, not the district, but some district parents initiated a recall effort against Greg. If you thought S&W was divisive, you didn't see anything until you went on Facebook and read the comments against Greg for the recall effort. It was mean, it was ugly, it was divisive. I've lived here for 20 years and I have never seen anything like it. And we've had our share of divisive issues, haven't we? Nothing like this. The recall effort was withdrawn and life went on. I think the district needs to do two things. They're simple, they're easy, they're painless. The first one is on behalf of the district community to apologize to Greg for the crap he took. Take the high road. Just say, we're sorry that he had to live through all that, because he lived through a lot. The second thing is to tell him, thank you. Thank you for the fact that S&W defeated, and that Spend Wisely defeated S&W, because look at the good that came out of it. Consider this. We got a brilliant new superintendent. We got an even more brilliant chief financial officer in Bruce. I don't know about that. And with Bruce, over our budget and finances, you all know better than anybody what has happened. The negligence that he found, the oversight that he found, the abuse that he found, the stuff like the kindergarten thing, which went on for years, and we had people paying full-day kindergarten when they didn't have to. Bruce caught all that. He got you guys off the 5-year cycle. You've got a new budget philosophy, a new budgeting approach. We've got a balanced budget. We are in great financial condition, but I don't think any of it would have happened had Greg Miller started spend wisely, and S&W had been defeated. Consider if S&W had passed and what was going on at the time. Where would we be today? So my point of view is simple, painless, it takes you 1 minute. Greg, we're sorry for all the crap you took. Second, thank you. Actually, thank you for your Spend Wisely campaign, because it really did us a huge favor. That's my point of view.
Would anyone else like to make a public comment at this time? All right, at this time, we will entertain celebrations from members of the board. David, I'm going to start with you down there.
No pass.
All right, Jean?
I just have a couple. Last night I got to attend the jazz band performances, jazz bands, I should say. There were 3 of them performing at the Shelton, and that's just a beautiful venue, and Jeff Cole does a great job. It was really fun to see. And of course, the All Right Festival. Randy might talk about this too, but I got to see the documentary for Akeem, and it was really powerful because there was a Webster Groves High School graduate who was a producer, and they had this young woman who starred in it take audience questions, and it was really, really powerful how much it had an impact. And such a timely film on racism, policing, all the issues that are currently in the St. Louis area. It's all in that. So anyone who hasn't seen For Akeem, I really think we should bring it to a larger community event, because I think it's worth seeing.
So I went to the event on Saturday night at Webster Methodist Church, which was Amen, A-Ladies, and the Hudson Harmonies raising money for Webster Rockland Ministries. And Amen, A-Ladies are always great, but the Hudson Harmonies, holy cow, stole the show. And for 20 minutes, I mean, they practice, they have a great choir teacher or music director or whatever, but they, for 20 minutes on their own, kept it going, solos, dances. It was really, really, really worthwhile. It's a great event.
So I had a couple celebrations. So one, I wanted to celebrate successful student interviews. This past couple of weeks, we've had interviews with groups and with individual students based on what students would like to see in the high school principal, which have gone extremely successful to students' approval. Secondly, the boys basketball team were in the Final Four, state bound, I believe. And then I'd also like to celebrate that we're having an upcoming ACT test for juniors, free to juniors of charge, based on the board taking the fall for it, seeing as she's ready to pull back. And that's really helpful to us. So.
I don't believe that the last time we met, we had celebrations, so prior to that, and the next day after our previous board meetings, that we had the MSBA Legislative Day down in Jeff City, and I wanted to just thank John, and we had a couple students that went along with us. For the first time that I recall in a long time that we might have ever had students. We have occasionally would have a member of the public would go down, but it was nice having the students down. Our group was recognized on the floor of the Senate for attendance, and it was a really interesting and well-presented day by the MSBA and the program that we attended, and we got a chance to meet with several of our elected officials who were always willing and able to give us time to talk about what's going on there. And I want to thank John for driving us all down for the day, and my board colleagues for in their attendance as well. It was an outstanding day, and we got some good information about some things for the members of the public who would like to know what's going on in Jeff City. The MSBA website is always available to, and they have public sectors on that for you to take a look at some of the things that their lobbyists and legislative advocacy folks are working on. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Otherwise, even reach out to the board members as well for information on current legislation that's out there. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. So.
I have no idea why I skipped you. I
That's okay. My memory
You blurted to
is,
Doug somehow. I don't know how.
my memory is fading where the meetings took place as it related to what Dr. Fields and the Steger students did of a North Webster celebration. Was for those who were in attendance, it's a tremendous celebration of the history of North Webster. And I really encourage people who were unable to be there to view the interviews that are online. It's a nice historical recollection, and it's important to have that history and give that history to further generations. But it was a long evening, but it was a very enjoyable evening. And kudos to Dr. Fields and the staff and the students there.
Thanks for remembering to mention that, Arnold. Mr. Smith,
I'll pass.
you only have so many more of these opportunities, my friend. All right, John, Kathy, brief updates or?
Kathy, do you want to give before I start with
I
mine?
have one. We have 2 students at the high school, 2 seniors, that have been recognized as Missouri Scholars 100, which is a program that honors the top seniors in the class of 2018 in the state. And we have 2.
I wanted to give, we got some special guests here tonight, but wanted to give a few other accolades. Our schools have all really stepped up, I think, this year for Black History Month and have done a lot of neat programs. Dr. Stricker mentioned the event that was held at Steger's celebration of North Webster. Highlighting a couple of the other schools, just for the sake of time. Hudson Elementary, again, had a really special event where they invited in a lot of people to come and interact with their kids. They had a pro football player there that was working with kids. They had some local barbers and beauticians that were there that were doing demonstrations of cutting and braiding of hair to show students. Edward Mahan has been in a lot of different places lately, but it was really special. The students that got an opportunity to select what person and experience they had a chance to go visit. Very neat. The most recent one that I got a chance to attend, and Sandy was one of the presenters there, was Bristol School. And they had a lot of different local African Americans some who are a little bit more known in our community, such as the mayor, such as the principal for Steger Computer School, although he's not that well known, he's certainly building a reputation. But then they had a lot of attorneys that were present, architects, just different people within the community that got to present and share with the students at the school about their dreams and how to follow your dreams. And so again, those are celebrations of our entire school district community, very powerful event, just kind of wanted to lift them up. Kathy mentioned the Missouri Scholars Academy folks. Our bands and our strings programs continue to excel. The strings program just got back from Carnegie Hall where they got to perform for a large crowd. What a super cool experience that they had. Recently, the Silver Strings received 4-1 ratings. It's the first time that all of their ratings have been 1. They told us that their averages have been 1 before, but this is the first time where all of their scores were 1. I wanted to highlight Dr. Drake, who has been a teacher at our school for a long time. He recently published a book, his first one, and it's a story of African Americans in St. Louis back in the early 1800s. And I haven't read it yet, but I heard it really speaks to a number of the people that were present in the 1800s, as well as the contributions that they made to the city, which are stories that are often untold. So I just wanted to give him props. Also wanted to acknowledge, we had some students that participated in the Bridges program, so I had some high school students at the University of Missouri St. Louis. And this is a program that just helps to prepare students for college and the workforce. Students give up 2 Saturdays a month, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's a pretty big deal for high school students to go and interact with other people, not just on work-ready skills, but also help them with standardized tests, ACT prep, and the such. They were recently recognized. 100% of the students from the Bridges participate end up going on to college. So a really neat program. Next, what we wanted to do, we invited some special guests, a combination of coaches and student athletes, as well as faculty and students. First, I wanted to acknowledge the Webster Groves High School swim team. So I was going to ask Coach Brashears and the swimmers to come on up. Sorry, I cut out for a second. And Dan, if you wouldn't mind working your way to the mic, he's been here before, he's got his notes ready. We have in Webster Groves, and I know many of us know this, but we have a phenomenal swim team. Our girls team is really, really outstanding. And this year they finished in top 5 in the state in swimming, and the class won. And we also had
a white joke. Let him tell the story.
Okay, sorry. And a lot of superstar individuals, and some of them are here tonight. So we wanted to just bring them together, let Dan have the floor, and acknowledge them. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. Five of the 7 girls who competed at state were able to make it here tonight. We had a great season. We ended the season dual meet 7-1 record. We were second in our conference, just behind Kirkwood. We actually finished 7th at state this year. The girls, the whole group of girls, an awesome group. In my 20+ years here, this has been one of the most fun, hard-working groups of kids that I've ever worked with. It was also the largest. We started out the year with 53 athletes, including divers, and we ended the season with 49. So 49 girls and crammed into 5 lanes over at the university. It's pretty compact, you know, they all made the most of it. One of the most impressive things, all 49 of our athletes were scholar athletes this year. So that is pretty impressive. The girls who are here with us tonight, well, the first 2 that weren't, Chloe Vitale was our diver. She finished 20th at state. Kendra Howard is a junior. She finished 12th. She was on our medley relay team that finished 12th. She was 7th in the 200 IM as an individual. 200 freestyle relay that was 6th, and our 400 freestyle relay that finished 2nd. With us tonight, Madeline Collier is a freshman. She swam on the 200 medley relay that finished 12th. She also swam 50 freestyle and the 100 backstroke as an individual, finishing 12th in both of those. Parker Hageman finished 4th in the 200 freestyle. She finished 2nd in the 100 backstroke in her individual events. And then she was also part of the 200 freestyle relay and the 400 freestyle relay. Our other sophomore, Elizabeth Reagan, finished 25th in the 50 free, 12th in the 100 free, and she was part of that 400 freestyle relay that finished 2nd. Again, our juniors, Kendra and Chloe, who could not be here. And then our 2 seniors that participated, Izzy Alvers was part of our medley relay team, our 200 freestyle relay team, and Catherine Kempf was a member of all 3 relays, and she also swam the 500 freestyle and finished 16th in the state in that. Catherine and Izzy were our captains, probably 2 of the best captains I've ever had the privilege of working with, and they're going to be greatly missed. And it was a great year. Hopefully we get to come back here and talk to you guys again next year.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much for coming. Great job. Next, what we wanted to do is we wanted to honor the faculty and the students who make the All Right possible at Webster Groves High School. I won't tell a lot about the All Right possible or the All Right Festival. I'll ask Steve Leftridge to step up and maybe introduce some of the folks, but I will say that the faculty and the students dedicate, and when we say countless, you know, it's an overused term, but they dedicate an extraordinary amount of time to making literature, to making art, to making the arts in general come alive. And they do it in very intentional, thoughtful ways. It's one of those things where every aspect of the entire festival is very well thought out. And the students at the high school had the opportunity to participate in some really workshops where they learned. They had a chance. Trinity, my right hand right here, was able to present a powerful piece to her peers that touched a lot of people. And tonight we just wanted to give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about the festival and acknowledge the people. So Steve, would you mind kind of taking the lead and stepping into a mic that works? Thanks.
I have no prepared statements this evening. This is our 4th year for doing the All Right Festival. It's grown over over the 4 years, and this year we had our biggest and most expansive and most diverse and I think most successful festival yet. The All Right Festival is a 5-day festival during which we bring in about 50 guests from all over the country. Almost half of our guests this year came from all over the United States, from New York and from California and other parts of the nation just to be with us for this event. And we have some of our team with us. Deb Bowman and Rita Chapman are both here tonight, and the three of us kind of got the ball rolling 4 years ago, and we've expanded our team to be a lot of members of the English department. A couple of our student interns who we have to work on this festival really all year long to make it happen. Now that we've wrapped up the 4th annual All Right Festival, we will be take a couple of weeks off maybe and then get started again planning the next one. We end up staging about 43 or 4 assemblies in 5 days. We have either 1 or 2 assemblies every hour of the day for 5 straight days. So it's a bit of a trick to plan an assembly, but planning 43 or 44 of them in a row takes a lot of work and a lot of planning. And we have an amazing team together that puts this together, and it ends up being a really rewarding and edifying and fun special festival for our students. And Trinity Madison was our intern this year who took care of our drama department. Our drama department puts on 4 original productions as part of the festival. And we have Simon Moorbeck here who headed up our film program. The students make original short films as part of the festival. We have art students who are making original art. Each one of our guests that comes, all 50 of our guests, walks away with an original piece of art as their party gift. We have musical buskers who perform all week long at every event. There's music and so much more. We have a writing contest, of course, that takes place. We had about 25 different student writers who produced original works, and they served as opening acts for our guests this year, and we give them a prize at the end of the year, at the end of this festival, along with our Art Right prize and our filmmaking prize. We have 11 workshops with special guests that take place, breakout sessions around the building. Our Food Stew classroom provides all of the hospitality. And all told, we have over 200 students who are either performing or contributing or entering contests or helping us run the festival as interns or pages. And what we kept hearing this year about the festival, everyone who joined us, the guests who came in, have never seen anything like it. They think it's really an original thing that is unique to Webster Groves High School. So we're real proud of it, and we're going to keep it going. So thank you very much.
Steve, would you mind just maybe 1 or 2 of the influential people, or just the powerful speakers? I mean, I heard a number. Gene mentioned for Akeem, which was a tearjerker for a lot of us to meet the young woman who's the subject of the story. But could you just give a couple?
The English department started this festival, but it has grown into be where it really isn't an English event. It's really an event about life and about life's journey, and the people who join us all have really fascinating stories to tell. And so sometimes we're a film festival, and sometimes we are a writers festival, and sometimes we're a festival about activism and journalism and all kinds of other things. The For Akeem film was a real highlight because the subject of the film, a young woman named Dajia Shelton, ended up being able to join us, and the students really didn't know she was going to be there, so they watched her story for an hour and a half and were really drawn in to it. And then she materialized on stage at the end of it, and it was an unforgettable moment really when she was here. But we had some other highlights. I don't know. Yeah, Tongo Eisen Martin, who came from San Francisco. He's one of the great slam poets in the world, and he's an activist who works in a lot of federal prisons, and he has these amazing spoken word pieces that he'll stand and recite these from memory for 8 or 9 minutes. And we had a lot of folks like that who joined us. We had Sylvester Brown Jr., who was, I think, a real galvanizing moment for a lot of our kids. We had a stand-up comedian who had just been on the Jimmy Fallon show, who was, the energy in the room was incredible when he was here. We had the Missouri Poet Laureate this year, Aliki Barnstone. We had Ellen Hopkins, one of the most successful and popular young adult writers working today. and a really long list of other great guests who joined us this year. And you know, the students are such a major part of this that a lot of the highlights this year really were contributed by the students themselves. So,
May I ask you a question?
yes.
In the future, can you make sure that board members get this in advance? I probably would have gone to, you know, several more if I'd known all the talent in advance.
All right then.
I would.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, we're very proud of our program. If you,
And I was so impressed, I could see the artwork in the library that hadn't yet been given away.
Right.
It's incredible. I mean, you've got all the arts into this. I love it.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, the correspondence log and the board calendar are both in your packet for review. Any additions to the calendar that you want to make us all aware of? Anyone?
Who's doing the,
Yeah, we need
let's
to.
talk April
April 6th, April 8th.
6th.
Oh, you know what, that's Easter. No, so, 4th of that week. Oh, never mind.
Easter's really cool.
Okay.
So is it 7:30 to 9:30 or is it 8:30 to 10:30? It says 7:30 to 9:30 down here, and my calendar I have it listed as 8:30 to 10:30, that's all.
Same. So Jean and Sherry, you guys kind of put this together.
I don't think we said 7:30.
It's really early.
Okay. All right.
So it should be 8:30?
Yeah.
I'm traveling back from Minnesota, so I won't be able to do that.
I think I can do that.
I could do the first hour if needed.
Okay, I can probably come after that. So we put the 3 of us down here.
At this time, if the faculty who's here as part of the All Right, the students who I'm sure have work to do or yards to swim, if you want to go ahead and break away at this point, you can. You're welcome to stay, but you understand. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have reports from superintendent and staff. John?
Mr. Ellerman.
Good evening. With me this evening to talk about and present 2018-19 salary schedule is Mike Muldrow, who was a member of the salary negotiations team and can speak to issues and comments from the standpoint of the teachers group as we go along with the presentation and the recommendation this evening. First of all, just let me say, I think it's appropriate to take a few minutes and kind of get an understanding and take a little bit of a deeper look than maybe we do at on some of the items as we go through the year, because teacher compensation in any school district, and Webster Groves is no exception, is a big deal. It has a direct impact on the quality of staff that the district can attract and retain. And it represents the largest single portion of what district resources are used for. About 60% of the district operating funds goes toward teacher compensation which includes salaries and benefits. So I don't think that it can be overemphasized. This is probably one of the most important functions of the board, is setting compensation, setting teachers' compensation. In Webster, it's a little bit different than a lot of other school districts, particularly in Missouri, where there's no formal contract, there's no formal vote. In many districts, there is an organized teachers union, as it's referred to. There's a formal written contract, working conditions and salary schedule. There's a formal vote of membership on the meet and confer and the working conditions and that contract each year or each period of time that it's negotiated. That's not the way it's set up in Webster Groves. There is a meet and confer process, but there is not a formal written contract, and there's not a formal vote of the teachers taken. This has been in place for a number of years now, somewhat unique in Missouri, as I mentioned, and I think works very well. In terms of the committee members, I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, so I apologize that I have to get a list, but I do want to recognize all of them while I grab this over here. If, Mike, if you wanted to just talk about the process and the teacher's perspective on that. Please. Go ahead.
Well, I can speak real quickly to the process. The process is really interesting, as Bruce was saying. In the Webster Groves School District, we come in, we have a representative from every school. And we have a representative from the board, and we have several representatives on the board, and we have representatives from the central office. And we come into that room with our hats off. We come into with a shared vision of what is best for the district. Our big pushes in Webster Groves are sustainability and competitiveness. And those two don't always match, and we found a pretty nice balance between the two through Bruce's system that he's put together for us. But the bigger concept here is how we have these conversations, and they are open, they are honest, and there's no group fighting for one side or the other. It's not staff versus central administration versus Board of Education. It is everyone coming in with a collective interest of what's best for the district, what's best for the kids, and that allows our conversations to really run fluidly, to really look at the problems at hand and problem solve anything that we run across. So we're very fortunate to have a system that we put in place coming on 20 years ago, I guess. 1999 is when we initially started it, but it's only gotten better from that.
Thank you, Mike. The goal of the group, the Meet and Confer group, of course, they talk about salaries and also what we refer to as issues. Tonight, what we're talking about in particular is the salary aspect of that. The general goal of the district has long been to maintain a teacher's salary schedule that was at or above the county median. But as you develop a salary schedule and you put specific compensation in place, it becomes helpful, I think, in the process to define that a little better than just having a general goal of at or above the county median. And so in the process of putting together the model last year, where this is the second year of the model that was put together, that is formally and specifically benchmarked and every channel and every step of the salary schedule to St. Louis County medians. So what we did last year was set that specific goal at 105% of the county median. This includes all of the school districts in St. Louis County and across the entire salary schedule. Because we're using this year's salary schedule to develop next year's recommended compensation, we also have to include a factor of what we think is going to happen to salaries in other districts from this year into next year in order to maintain the district's position at 105% of the county median. As Mike had mentioned, we had some objectives in doing this, in kind of setting up the model. One was to be competitive externally in order to be able to compete with other districts for the best and the brightest, and not just to attract them, but then be able to retain them as well. And we want to attract, attract in the early years, retain in the middle, and I say recognize in the latter. But what that means is recognize that those latter years of compensation has an indefinite impact on teachers' compensation as they retire. Their retirement benefits through the state system is based on their highest 3 years of average 3 years of compensation. Normally, those are the last 3 years of employment, and so those final years of service to the district have a lifelong impact on the teachers for the rest of, or for their retirement years. We also want it to be equitable internally. So regardless of what your degree level is, how many years you've been with the district, that you're being paid equitably relative to other teachers in the district, given their years of experience and investment that they've had in education, in their education over the years. At the same time, there is limited resources in the district to support compensation, and so we have to be responsible with the resources that we have, and therefore we need to make sure that the model and the compensation that the district sets is not just affordable this year or this year and next year, but that it's sustainable both in the funding part of it over time, but also that it's stable and it's predictable, that it doesn't result in wide variations in compensation levels from one year to the next year, and so that the district can predict it and plan for it from a budget standpoint. And then finally, the compensation needs to be supportable from the community. We know that in the past, the districts had to go to the voters, ask for some funding support as resources became more scarce. That hasn't been the case in the last few years, that we haven't had to do that. But if it comes to that point in the future, we want to make sure that we have a compensation system that the community feels comfortable with, that they feel like is reasonable and feel like they can support. So specifically, what that then translates into in terms of the model is something that we update annually. We go out to every school district in St. Louis County and get their salary schedule, their complete salary schedule, and we input it into a database. And then we create what I call a median profile based on those salary schedules in order to determine what the median is. It's not rocket science. It's actually fairly simple and straightforward. Say it's not E equals MC squared. It's just Webster W equals 1.05 times C, the county median. It can get kind of complicated once you get in there, especially when we're trying to move from the salary schedule of the past to the new model, and we're not doing that all in one fell swoop because there's some legacy issues of how it was structured before that makes it difficult to just force it into a new form. And so that has to happen over time. And so those conversations can get a little bit complicated, but when you look at the principle of the model, it's pretty simple. And that can be demonstrated by taking a look at the bottom are the years of service, and we go from year 1 through year 35, and then dollars of annual compensation along the left. And of course, in the early years, you start out at the beginning of the salary schedule, and then you work your way up to the top of the salary schedule. That blue line, and this is the master's, for the master's column, but there's a similar profile for the bachelor's and the master's plus 30, the master's plus 50, the PhD. That profile looks similar. It starts out and then gradually builds in an incline to a plateau at the end of the career. And it looks that way not just in Webster right now, which is actually the green line, which you can't see a lot of on this one because it really didn't, this particular channel of the salary schedule didn't change much. But the county median is this lower blue line. 105% of the county median then is represented by the purple line. And then we want to be about 1% above that because, again, we're looking forward a year and using this year's data, and we're assuming, based on historical trend, that districts generally increase their salary schedules on average by about 1% each year. And so teachers get, on average, that 1% plus whatever step they would have gotten, but those steps get incremented about 1% each year. And when we made that assumption, and now we've got 1 year's worth of data for the master's column, and we find that the current year's compensation, the green line for Webster, and where we need to be based on this year's 105% of median, they're almost the same place. So that was a very valid assumption last year when we thought it would increase 1%. That turned out to be pretty true on the master's column of the schedule. So what we have in terms of legacy issues to deal with are these outliers, where the line's not smooth for Webster. And these were what were referred to as super steps, the way compensation used to be structured in Webster. And the unfortunate part is that it's in the middle of the career, and so this didn't help in terms of being further above the county median than the 105%. It didn't help us attracting teachers at the beginning of the salary schedule, and it didn't help the teachers at the end of the career that has an ongoing impact in retirement. And so it was kind of in the middle, and it was really a remnant of when Webster's salary schedule for teachers only had 14 or 15 steps, and there were no steps after that. And yet other school districts had schedules with 20 steps, 23 steps. And so what Webster had to do was to get up to the level of compensation in 15 years, what other districts took 20 years. Otherwise, the teachers in Webster would be under the market once they got past 16, 17 years. At those later years in their career, they would wind up being far under other county school districts, which would have an ongoing impact on their retirement. So what the district's solution was in the past was to implement some super steps so that after that years of service, after a number of years, there would be a jump, a one-time jump, and then you would plateau at that. And then a number of years after that, there would be a second super step. So that's where we're finding here at the step 13 or 14, this big jump here is the first super step. The second, and then you're plateaued, the teacher would be plateaued at that for a number of years. Then there would be a second super step here. We're only seeing a little bump there because as part of the implementation of the new model last year, this step was actually pulled back a couple $1,000, so it moderated this second super step, but this used to look just about as severe as the initial super step. And so we were able to pull that back, and then the rest of the line is pretty much starting to come into alignment with what the other county data is. But we still have this remaining kind of legacy issue that we'll talk about here in a few minutes, a little bit more about. We also, because of the way that that was structured, we had to grandfather. We had to grandfather some teachers who were being compensated at higher levels than the new model would indicate. So when we pulled back on this super step, if there was a teacher that was already being paid on the old salary schedule, rather than cutting their pay by $2,000, they got grandfathered in. That was important, particularly in the bachelor's schedule, where we went from 14-step schedule to an 11-step schedule, and those teachers that were at the 12, 13, 14 step, now with an 11-step schedule, it tops out much lower than the old schedule did. Those teachers were grandfathered, and the idea would be that eventually, as salaries rise over time, that the county data would catch up to where those teachers were. And as they move in years of experience, that the combination of the rising salaries in the county and their movement in terms of years of service would eventually bring them back into alignment with the county median. So how is the model actually working? I would say that it's working reasonably well, but we only have a single year of experience with it. We set it up last year. It looked really good in terms of what we were assuming in that master's level, but at the same time, it didn't make much progress in chipping away at what the super step is. So you can see our previous compensation here and what our recommended compensation are the same. And what should happen is that our current compensation and recommended compensation, the recommended should grow just a little bit over the current. That's the idea. And eventually, then this peak here, this outlier, would be absorbed by that rising line on both ends, the years before, the years after, that would eventually rise and consume that super step. And that didn't really happen in the master's column as much as we would have liked to have seen happen. We also looked at the master's plus 30. So we'll take a look at that. We made a lot better progress. This is a little busier. I'm going to blow it up a little bit if I can. So we can see it a little bit better, at least the relevant parts of it. So this just has two channels on the same. That's why it looks a little more complicated. It has the Masters plus 30 and the Masters plus 50 on it. And the reason for that is because other districts don't have a Masters plus 50. Webster is the only district in the county, probably in the state, that has a Masters plus 50 column on it. And so we put both of those on the same because the Masters plus 50 is just an add-on to the Masters plus 30 column. We don't really have any market data from other districts to compare Masters plus 50 with, so we put them on the same graph with the Masters plus 30, but the basics are the same. This blue line is the Masters plus 30, which all other school districts have. This is their median information. The purple line is 105% of that median. And then when you look at the legend over here, the green, that green portion is the current webmaster plus 30 salary profile. And the kind of the light orange then is the recommended, because what happened was that the 105% of the median rose to what we had been paying, and so now since we need to keep 1% ahead of that because we're shooting for next year, that increased the compensation in the years coming up to this super step and after the super step. So you see that light orange line above the green line on both ends, the front end here. It's a little obscured by this purple, by the purple line, 105% median, but you can see the green line coming up under this and the orange line rising on both ends. So it's starting to flatten out this peak here, and that's what we had hoped would happen, that over 5 or 6 or 7 years that would erode away through market changes in the data, and then we would have a nice smooth profile here eventually. And so we're still hoping that that would be the case over time. 1 year isn't enough, statistically significant enough to hit the panic button and say, oh, it's not going to work, we need to do something with this. So the salary committee, they're recommending that we continue to get another year's worth of data, monitor the district's financial position, and then come back, and if we do not continue to make progress in absorbing these outliers, these super steps, that we revisit it in next year or the year after if the district's financial condition dictates that, or if it looks like market data is actually not doing what we thought it would do over time. So when we looked at it, we felt like because we're at every step and every channel, we're above the county median, we're competitive. We're also equitable internally because we are benchmarked in every column and every step. And there is some reward for continuing the education from the bachelor's to the master's plus 30. With given a number of years of experience, the salaries increase. So the increased investment in education results in increased compensation on the schedule. So that seems to be equitable from an internal standpoint. It's sustainable, as we'll see when we look at the bottom line. Okay, we can see these lines, we kind of make sense of them, we know where they're coming from, but what do they cost? But what's the bottom line? We'll see that in just a minute. And because of that, knowing that how we're benchmarked, we have higher than average expectations of teaching quality, so it makes sense that we have that we would pay higher than average. And then if it's affordable in terms of what the annual increase is to the district, seems like it would be supportable. So it works better. The model is when it's fully implemented, it will put the dollars in the right place at the right time. Here, these dollars aren't in the right place or at the right time. They don't reflect the market, and they don't help us attract at the beginning of the schedule, nor do they help teachers at the end of the schedule. So these aren't in the right place or at the right time, but it's a legacy cost, and eventually they'll go away. We project that when fully implemented, this model compared to the other model will cost about $500,000 per year less. And the reason why is when we look at the graphs, this represents additional dollars spent that are essentially not necessary. And as this smooths out, the cumulative amounts of these plus what you can't see on this are the teachers that are grandfathered off the schedule because their compensation was higher than what the current schedule calls for. The combination of those will eventually disappear as those teachers retire and as these salaries increase over time. And so then there will no longer be a premium paid in the middle, and there will no longer be grandfathering, and that will help save the district, like I said, about $500,000 a year. Just take a quick look at a couple of the other salary graphs. This is the bachelor's column, and it instead of being 23 steps, which I think the other columns are, this one, as I mentioned before, it tops out at 11. At year 11, and this is, you can see that other school districts as well do not have as long, so that incline is not as steep, nor is it as high. And it was the expectation essentially is that teachers would continue to improve their skills through continuing education. So this would, again, I try to keep the colors consistent. The blue line is the county median, the purple line is 105% of that county median. The green line here is what the current salary, the 17-18 salary schedule is at the bachelor's column, and then the orange line is the recommended 18-19. You can see that very little change in the bachelor's column of the schedule. So this wasn't quite as pronounced super step as we saw in the master's, but we also didn't make much progress in the bachelor's channel of eroding back either. So we're hoping that next year and in future years as we go forward that will happen. I mentioned before that we kind of have a unique channel on our salary schedule. That's the Masters plus 50, and it's starting to get what I'll call squeezed between the Masters plus 30 column and the PhD column. That's illustrated by kind of this graph here. I'll blow this up a little bit. The lower line here is the Masters plus 30 compensation level. The upper line is the PhD column, and What's happening is the Masters Plus 30 the Masters Plus 30 channel is rising a little faster than the PhD column, and so it's creating in the middle here particularly somewhat of a choke point, and so we actually are having to adjust what would otherwise be the difference between the Masters Plus 30 and the Masters Plus 50 schedule in order to keep Masters Plus 50 being a higher compensation level than even the PhD. If this continues to be the trend, you can see it's pretty tight in the beginning, it's pretty tight in the end, and then just one place in the middle. And as these super steps should disappear over time, those differences should then now narrow, and as that happens over time, there's not going to be a whole lot of space for a channel to live in between Masters Plus 30 and PhD, so at some point it may transition out of even being a relevant column, but the committee is recommending that while we still have room, there's been a lot of teachers invest in that additional education because the Masters Plus 50 column exists, and to just take that away at this time when it's not financially necessary, and while there's still enough room to have something in between would be premature. So what does all that look like on paper once you kind of get past the graph lines and so forth? What does the salary schedule actually look like is shown by this. Now, it's kind of small numbers. I guess I apologize if you can't really see what the numbers are, but what we have is the first column being, first set of columns being bachelors, and that first column is 2018-19. The second is 2017-18, and the third column is the difference between the two. So if you see nothing, that means the salary hasn't changed at that step for that channel. You can see there was only 4 steps that changed only very slightly in the bachelor's column. If you remember the green versus the orange in the bachelor's, that graph profile we looked at, those lines were on top of each other except for one little place. That's this little place here. And so this is another way of looking at that same data, just in numerical form. And what we're looking for are numbers in the difference in the early years and the late years, but not the mid years, because this is where the super steps are. The super steps are these 14, 15, 16, that's mid part. And so if we've got growth above and below that, that means the super step is beginning to disappear. It's going to eventually erode down into the smooth curve we're looking at. And so you can see from this numerically, like we saw when we were looking at the trend lines on the graph, that we made progress on the Masters Plus 30 and on the Masters Plus 50. A little bit of progress on the PhD, but mostly on the top end, very little on the bottom end of that. And then on the Masters and the Bachelor's, very little progress was made in the super step. So this is another way of demonstrating the same thing, but also teachers' inclination are to look at the salary schedule and see, what's 18-19 compensation compared to 17-18 compensation, and so the schedule was set up like this, so you can see really easily where salaries increased and where they stayed the same. As I said, we've looked at it graphically, we've looked at it numerically. What's the bottom line? What is this costing in terms of the overall budget impact? And that's good news. What that relates to, what it results in, is when we increment the teachers that have step movement available to them, we grandfather the teachers whose compensation are higher than what the recommended schedules would be, and including all of the grandfathering and all of and retaining the super step. The gross increase in teachers' compensation would be 2.74%. That compares favorably to what I was just reading about. The Bureau of Labor Statistics had just announced that the annual wage inflation currently is running at about 2.6%. And the net increase after we reflect what Eric Dunn, who wasn't able to make it here tonight, has been instrumental in the development of this model and the the implementation of even the overall collaborative process that Mike outlined before. He was unfortunately not able to be here this evening. He refers to the retirements and the savings that you get when a teacher retires off the top of the salary schedule and we hire in at the earlier years as slippage. And so when we incorporate those salary savings from resignations or retirements, we project that the actual net increase in terms of the net cost impact on the budget will only be 2.3%. That was based on assuming 10 retirements this year, and we're at 16 now. So the actual number that you'll see in the budget on the salary line item, when that comes to you actually next month for the draft, you'll actually see a number that's less than even 2.3% for the increase in the teacher's salary line item because of the retirements have been more than the 10 that was assumed in calculating these numbers. I think it also was, I felt like it was important to look at how that compared to what we thought the increase would be this year when the model was originally implemented last year. We projected what the cost, so last year we implemented the model, but we knew that the year after we would be updating the model, teachers would still be moving, and the year after that, the same thing. And so again, we're trying to look at things more than just 1 year at a time. We projected out last year, in last year's model, what we thought this year's salary increase and net cost increase would be, and we had projected 2.3%. So that was a bullseye, in my book at least anyway. So that really summarizes the model and what we were looking at here. I would ask Mike if he had any comments on the model or the salary schedule at this point, and then open it up for questions and answers from the board.
So from the teacher's perspective, we did a lot of education last year on what this model looked like. We really spent a lot of time talking to the teachers. What does it look like? This was a big departure from the previous schedules that Bruce had outlined. So the education really happened last year. And knowing that this model was going to continue, we'll see how it works out. We're pretty excited about how it worked out. And I think the teachers as a whole will be very excited about what we're seeing here. This is something that we were adjusting to as the new budgets and new sustainability concepts came through. And with the model that Bruce put forth and Eric put forth together, what they created was something that we're pretty excited about as a district, as teachers.
Do you have questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a quick comment. I've been fortunate to be on this Convert committee, and I know David and Jean both have been on it for several years. And I made the comment before, and I'm going to make it again tonight because I really think we didn't really stress enough at the beginning of the presentation, and this is not a hit at you guys, but from our standpoint, around the state, this is really unusual to have a group that really gets together and takes all the egos out of it. And I'm really, really proud of the leadership of our district. I'm proud of the teachers that are a part of this. And I'm honestly very humbled to be a part of the group that works on this kind of thing and kind of hashes out the goods, the bads, the otherwise that has kind of come to fruition with this model. And I really think it's something that when we talk about this with our colleagues from other districts around the state, they really want to hear more about how do you get people to do that? Because they talk about how they have so much animosity and how much there's so much we don't know what our superintendent really feels like, we don't know what our CFO really feels like, we know our teachers want all they can get, and blah, blah, blah. It's just talking about just conflict. And maybe we had that 20 years ago, but I wasn't on the board then, and I'm sure there was a lot more of it then. But it really is, it makes me feel really good about the way this committee works. And it's really a testament to everyone that's involved in it, and especially the teacher side, to really take a look at what's beneficial for our kids, for the districts, and they really do get it. And I'm very proud of that fact. So just kudos again to you guys and Eric as well for their leadership in making this kind of thing happen. Because it makes sense to a lot of people.
Thank you for that. I think I would just I'd elaborate on that a little bit, is that I think the model, although it seemed like a lot of work and pretty complicated when we were putting it together to get all of this and to get everything set up to be able to do this, that it's really elegant in its simplicity now when you look at it. And I think that one of the reasons that it was able to work in Webster is because of the process that we have here. You look at what happens in other districts where sometimes the compensation and the salary recommendations turn out not to be looking at the big picture like this helps do, but instead looking at the interests of the people who happen to be on the negotiating team. You can see that happening, and that the union, when you're doing kind of negotiations instead of meet and confer and collaboration, that union has to get something. And if it's just kind of something like this, where is the value added from the union, and how does that reconcile with the dynamics of the negotiating team that the other districts have? So I think that while this model might seem like, well, this is just kind of common sense, why aren't other districts using something like this? It just seems so consistent and equitable externally and internally. I think this process and collaboration that we have in Webster is kind of unique that made this possible.
Well, besides your awesome Excel spreadsheet and wonderful committee members and a great process, I want to stress that we all love having excellent teachers, and we want to be competitive. So I hope when you tell the teachers that we are approving this, which I assume we will very shortly, that it's because we want to keep our good teachers, we want to attract good teachers, we care about our kids, and we care about our staff.
Thank you. I just realized that when I grabbed the handout so I could not rely on my memory for all of the committee members, that I didn't actually name them. And I feel like I really need a shout out because some of them are on the board. Some of you serve on the committee. And so rather than trying to name them in any other particular order that might make one look more important than the other, it's alphabetical. So Mr. David Addison, board member, Jean Dugan, yourself, Eric Dunn, myself, Melissa Murphy, sorry, I got that one out of alphabetical order, Michelle Ferber, Edward Iber, Steve Lower, Mike Muldrow, Melissa Murphy, as I mentioned, Shayla Pott, Randy Rashal, and Amy Perot, and Sandy Wiley. And honorary member sitting in Dr. Simpson, our early superintendent.
All right.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I see that we also have nurses' salary schedules and support staff salary schedules on the agenda. Do you have presentations about those, Bruce, or would you like us to vote on? Okay, so then we need to go ahead and do a motion to approve this teacher salary schedule.
I move that the Board of Education approve the attached 2018-19 teacher salary schedule as proposed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Dr. Webb.
Good evening, everyone. Hope all is well. Just wanted to briefly talk with you about the support staff salary structure. I can say that we met as a committee about 4 different times, and the committee was awesome. I'm very happy to report that there were really no concerns that they had with regard to working conditions or anything like that. Everything just flowed very seamlessly with this group. So what you have before you, I placed a copy in your packet, is the overall recommendations that the committee had was that we wanted to make sure that we provide each person with an increase. So the recommendation is that each support staff member will receive a 2.5% increase. Also this year, if you remember last year, we noticed that our salary structure for support staff had not been increased for the past 3 years. And so we did a lot of work to provide equity to those staff members where it was applicable to in order to get them caught up with our salary structure. But for this year, we did a more in-depth look and took at what we've kind of done with the teachers, the market, and also other school districts. Because a lot of our support staff members, their positions can be found in the general market as well. And so based on that, there were some positions that we were, what we're calling the red in, where our base salary was either at the bottom or like one step above the bottom. And so what the committee recommended, and we're hoping you approve, is that we adjust some of those base salaries to move them up so that we're not at the bottom. And if we do that, then instead of it just being a 2.5 increase, then the support staff salary structure would be a total of 2.75% increase. Because what we'll do is provide everybody with a 2.5% increase, but those staff members whose salary was really below market or at the bottom, we'll provide them with equity in order to kind of catch them up as best we can and then take a look at it again for next year. Those are pretty much the recommendations from the committee. Does anybody have any questions about that?
At what point, could they be at medium, below medium, county medium?
They'll still be a little bit below, and our goal will be primarily, honestly, next year to really look at the different categories to try to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. In some districts, positions have different functions, right? And so they may be a little bit more expensive in other districts because their functions or their essential duties are different than what ours are. And so it'll be our goal to kind of take a look at that holistically across the board just to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. And then we may have to make recommendations to do a slow walk or maybe even a faster walk to kind of get us up in those positions that were in the red.
Has the supervision been aligned for these positions like we discussed last year at this time?
I'm sorry, can you?
The supervision been aligned, the evaluations for these individuals?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes. So what we've also, thank you. What we've also attached to this is the process to ensure that each principal or director or supervisor is effectively evaluating those support staff members every year. So what's been the practice is that the first 5 years you receive an evaluation, and every 3 years you are kind of on a cycle after that. The problem is that the support staff are literally paid off of their performance. And so annually they need to receive something so that they know how well they performed, and for that administrator or director to let them know you'll receive the full increase or not. And so that is the work that we've done with the principals. They have their spreadsheet, they know who's due to be evaluated this year. Plus we're going to work with them to discuss a narrative that we can put in there. So even if you're off cycle, you will receive some information related to your performance for that year with your raise or what your compensation will be for the upcoming year. So absolutely.
Other questions? All right, then I believe we need a motion to approve the support staff salary schedule.
I move that the Board of Education approve the attached 2018-19 support staff salary schedule.
Sorry.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Nurses.
And so that's pretty much the same process. As you remember, last year we removed the nurses salary group or employee group from the support staff and placed them on their own. So this group, I'm happy to report that they're feeling very well about everything. They didn't even want to meet in person, they just wanted to email, which is perfectly fine. Their questions or positions were really centered around making sure that they are still marketable, making sure that their rate is actually competitive, and they are. They're actually in the green now, which is excellent, which is where we came from. And again, they wanted to ensure that everybody received an increase. And so that's pretty much our recommendation for the nurses, is that we continue to maintain a competitive base salary at the different degree levels that nurses have, in addition to having the nurses receive a 2.5% increase for their salary for the upcoming year. We believe we're in a good place with nurses. We do have some conversations that we need to talk through as far as support with regard to the camp linemen, making sure that we have those pieces in place and what other things can we think through. So we may come back with some recommendations related to that. But overall, the committee were pretty satisfied with how things were going and just wanted to ensure we maintain our competitiveness and then also that each person received an increase.
Casey, have we still
also had to use a service to get substitute nurses,
Mhm.
someone's sick.
Yeah,
And
so-
how much more expensive is that?
Yeah, it's very expensive. So the good thing is, though, we were able to hire 3 sub-nurses for our district, which is excellent. And so the thing that we want to talk through with the nurses and the process is that is our sub-nurse salary competitive? And so that's what we really need to look into and have some information for next year. They really want to take their time with that. So we do still utilize Maxim in addition to nurse finders. And Maxim, for example, their hourly rate is $37 per hour. And we do use Maxim nurses for some weeks or days for Camp Lyman. So just imagine if they work so many hours, then you're at time and a half, right? So yeah, so that there is an increase there. Planning to have some conversations about some possibilities of making some different choices personnel-wise to see if we can staff that differently or create something differently so that we can eliminate that cost, or if not eliminate it, then minimize it. Nurse Finder is another company that we use, and I think their hourly rate is more like $32, $33, but it's still very, very expensive.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the nurse's salary schedule.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Jonathan, this next, turn it over to you.
Well, we thought that at the last meeting, John and Thomas presented to us on safety. Certainly student safety and well-being is our #1 priority. Have to do that really well and then educate them. And he presented, and we had a chance to dialogue and ask questions. We also, as we all know in the community, have a national protest that's scheduled for this coming Wednesday. And when I was meeting with Emerson and Amy to kind of plan the agenda for tonight, we were talking about, is there a way just to be, we're always open as administrators, as board members with our community, but is there an opportunity that we can put together real soon where we can ask any kind of questions or have the community ask any questions that they want of us? And since this meeting was already on the schedule, we thought it provided that opportunity. So I wanted to just kind of briefly share on the plans that we have for the walkout. John already presented, we dialogued on school safety a lot. I'll present a little bit on the walkout, then invite the board to ask questions. We have note cards in the back. We didn't know how many people would be here tonight, but we asked people to, if you wanted to ask a question, to fill out a note card. John has collected those, Kathy's collected those. Once I'm kind of through it, John's gonna go up to the mic and read the questions that we get. I think we're small enough and intimate enough that once we get through the questions that we could just kind of step up to the mic and ask any further questions, but we wanted to make sure that we honored all the different people in the room and the questions that they had. So that's why we created that process. So first of all, regarding the walkout, the national walkout, being national and kind of the way that it's been designed, it's been getting a lot of publicity and attention. I have met multiple times with superintendents from around the region. We've had the opportunity to meet with police officers from around the region. We've been in communication with our local law enforcement. We're really blessed tonight to have Chief Curtis and Captain Spears here, who can certainly answer questions on behalf of the police as it comes to protecting our kids in our schools, as well as anything that is asked of them regarding their response to the protests. So our response to the protest, first of all, is this is a little bit different than the Stockley verdict. With the Stockley verdict, there wasn't the national attention, the spotlight, the RSVP for a protest that exists with this one. So it's a little bit unique. But like the Stockley verdict or anything else that would come where children might feel the urge to express their First Amendment rights in a different kind of way, such as through a walkout, through a protest, we don't initiate, we don't organize what they create. But we listen to them, we talk to them, and if that initiation or organization comes from them, because we feel that it's our responsibility of a public school district to help educate them and support them, we provide support and space for them to proceed and to lead this. We are very blessed. again, I think this is the same for all school districts, but we have some amazing students. Organization at leadership, I should say, with the different schools where we are, is already occurring at Steger Hickson and the high school in terms of student leaders. Naturally, our high school is going to be a little bit more organized, a little bit intentional with it. Looks a little bit different when you're working with younger children. But the principals at all the levels have been working with all those student leaders. They've been great. I've met with student leaders at the high school. First of all, certainly we want to give them the space to express themselves, but we also really want to keep them safe. We want to keep them safe while they're doing this. And because of the public nature of this particular protest, because of the identified locations of the protest, because of what we hear different.
Can you explain that? I'm not sure everybody knows about the identified locations.
Yeah, so when you get on the website, there's a national website that was created as part of the women's march that occurred approximately a month, maybe a little over a month ago. And on that particular website, there is information about the march. And then it tells you that you can create a march, or create a protest, create a walkout, and get on there and let people know about that walkout and that protest. So we had, now this hasn't happened the younger levels, but at the high school, we had a high school student who got on there and organized it, and identified himself as a leader. So on that website, it identifies him as the leader, it identifies the location of where this walkout will occur. Again, a little bit different than the protest that occurred early in the fall. While that's maybe good for some who want to participate, that also poses other concerns, because people who may not have those same feelings have the opportunity to show up in that particular location. Actually, superintendents have a lot of concern about that, naturally. We have, again, dialogue with superintendents around the area, worked with the police department, and working with the students. I think that's a critical element here. We think that we've created the conditions for the students to have a successful protest or walkout. And again, what I've told people who have asked, because community have already engaged with me and asked, is it's got its own purpose, which is gun legislation. So I know some school districts, all school districts take a lot of different positions to this. Some have kind of tried to switch the narrative to make it maybe about school safety or something, which certainly it's related to school safety, but it's broader than school safety. Because I do feel like we have to respect the wishes of the students, we have to stay out of the organization initiation. It's not our responsibility to shift the narrative for this particular day on March 14th. So on that day, what we've done with the 6th through, so I sent out a communication to the parent community as well as the faculty. I also sent it to high school students that we're not permitting adults to come up and join the 6th through 12th graders with their particular walkout and the protest. And the main reason is our goal is the safety of the kids. And if we have adults that come up, we may or may not know who they are. They certainly will have the rights. They certainly, anyway, I'm just gonna leave it at that. We don't know who they are. I want all eyes of administration and the police on the scene on our kids and watching our kids and keeping them safe. I believe, and I think we've seen, there's a lot of opportunities for people to together or by themselves state what they think about gun legislation. There's different opportunities locally, and they can certainly respond to legislators or anything. So we are at the 6th through 12th grade levels telling the other adults to stay away, whether they're community who we know or don't know, or their parents at this time. For the younger levels, we felt like, because I had actually heard from more elementary school parents than I heard from students or adults about the high school, about the upper school levels, and just really interested in possibly going up to schools themselves to walk out or protest or participate. Ultimately made the decision, and the elementary, the younger levels are aren't getting a lot of traction and talk at any of the other levels. And I was one of a few people that had heard from that constituency group. Ultimately making the decision, considering a lot of feedback, the development and nature of kids, that I didn't feel comfortable bringing the experience, supporting the experience in the same way that we're doing the middle school, high school levels with the younger school levels. I think that the events that occurred in Parkland, while some of our elementary school kids certainly know about it, it's really what kind of jump-started the whole movement in this particular protest. Not that in isolation, there's been a lot of school shootings. But ultimately felt like it was best to kind of separate at that middle school level from our elementary school. What we did do, because I knew that some parents were interested in this, was to provide the opportunity for the parents, if they wanted, to come to the school to check their children out and to engage in a walkout at the school. So similar to the middle school and high school levels, we've designated space at those schools that if a parent wishes to chooses to do that, they certainly have the freedom to be able to go ahead and do this. So currently, we know that it's a tricky situation, but we feel kind of the threshold for where kids have to own this and be a little bit more responsible is at that 6th grade level. In terms of, so we feel good about what we've established. The police have been fantastic. The Webster Police, as well as working with the Rock Hill Police in support of our other schools. It's continuing to move. People are continuing to talk about different dynamics related to this. I have great leaders in the school system that if they feel like something happened or the situation shifts, that will protect the students. That'll be our #1 priority, and if they have to adjust on the fly, I empower them and encourage them to do so as leaders within the building. Consequences for this has generated a lot of excitement too around the county and really the nation. Our approach, which is required of us as well, is to be consistent with what we did in the fall, and that any student that chooses to participate in this, what is an organized, initiated, and not led by the district at all, but we have awareness of it and we're kind of supporting the students and doing it safely, they will receive a cut if they leave class. Because we want the kids to be in class. We believe there are ways that they could express themselves differently, but if they leave class just like any other time, they'll give a cut. Now, if they go out and they peaceably participate, again, within the safety and the structure that we've provided, return to class in a timely manner, and then meet with the administration in their schools, as they did in the fall, to process the experience. Why did you do it? What did you learn from it? Kind of what implications does it have moving forward? Then what that cut becomes is an excused absence. So it's just kind of like an excuse like you were out for something else. So it's not really a punitive measure. It wouldn't go towards an unexcused absence, which would lead to a detention or something like that. That's kind of how it is. I do think it's something that as we move into the summer and the students are gone, that we just come back to also revisit the consequence. There's a lot of pros and cons for a lot of different consequences that I've heard. I really do feel like in terms of helping to prepare children to be active citizens in this world, that supporting them in a meaningful context to learn how to advocate is good for us to do. And I know I've received pushback on that, strong pushback on that from some, but I feel like that's what public education is all about. And I feel good about what our process is. So I'll answer any questions from the board. John's going to step up. Again, it doesn't have to be public that's here. It doesn't have to be just protest related. If it's something school safety related that you want to ask to. Anybody here?
So I just wanted to sort of make a statement. So I think freedom of speech and the ability to exercise freedom of speech is important. And I also think people need to understand freedom of speech isn't without cost. And so I do like the idea that there is a consequence for this. And that it seems like it is a measured consequence, and the further it has a way that it can be mitigated. It seems as though you've got a very appropriate process. You recognise, yes, if you want to make a decision, like many other things you may want to do, but understand there is always a cost for doing this, for expressing your views. So thank you for the way you put it together.
I did want to add too, because certainly it's relevant to our faculty who work in the schools. There's again, similar to our community, our faculty, as well as our student body, have different views on legislation. And what we have shared with the faculty is that they have an obligation as public school staff members in the context of the school day of remaining neutral. And we want to encourage them, if the curriculum aligns, to create space for children to discuss, debate, talk about legislation from the children's point of view. If it emerges as a topic of interest among the students, to create that opportunity and that space, but it's our obligation, all of our obligation, to remain neutral. There has been staff that have kind of just organically that have communicated with other staff opportunities that exist. If they want to advocate or get together, they can. And so we encourage them to exercise their public free speech, their First Amendment rights when outside the school day, but when we're working with kids, we don't want the kids to feel, because they do have different opinions, we don't want them to feel less than or to feel that their teacher thinks differently of them if the teacher takes a stand on something like this. So anyway.
That brings my one other question. What's being done to ensure that students who choose not to participate don't suffer sort of adverse sort of consequences of any sort?
That's a great question, because so again, providing the opportunity. So class continues as is, but that's one thing that we communicate. I've got an email that's going to go home to teachers. I wanted to see what happened tonight and how it went. But to go home, to go to staff with Mark, just to make sure that kids in the classes feel valued. Because again, in the fall, there were a lot of children that felt very strongly, and if they didn't feel like walking out was the way to do it, or that it wasn't the time, or this is a class I didn't want to miss. And so trying to make them feel safe. What we're doing at the 6th through 12th grade levels, again, creating with that separation on the 15th, is kind of having a day in support of school safety. So we're leaving the 14th as it was designed nationally to be about gun legislation. On the 15th, on the day after, we are encouraging, are in the schools, 3 things that are going to have opportunities. One is going to be for any student and faculty members who, out of care and concern for the school in Parkland, want to wear their colors, just out of a demonstration of care. We're inviting them to do so. It's an opportunity, again, not everybody has to participate. The other thing is if the students and the faculty want to contribute to a fundraiser, the school in Florida has set up a GoFundMe account, and with it you can kind of select what the money goes towards. And so students who want to contribute to the school, once again, can do that. And the third thing is that we're creating a chart, a wall, if you will, in the schools, where any student or faculty member, while they're the faculty's limited by what they can say on legislation, to create the space for kids to be able to express themselves at any point during the school day, any thoughts, feelings they have regarding what they can do to contribute to school safety in their schools. So again, trying to allow for that outlet for kids who want to, and faculty, who want to express themselves in other ways.
John, you talked about providing a safe and, for lack of a better term, controlled space for those who want to gather as a walkout. If there would be other people that have the opposing view, is there a safe space provided for them as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and so that's those are one of the things. Right now, there's no organization around that, but I heard first, actually, before I heard about the leadership that emerged for changes in gun legislation or the regulations, I had heard from people who were possibly doing like a counter-type protest. Now it's something that I think has some not just local, but national traction as well. And it's not, to my knowledge, you never know, but it's not organized, to my knowledge. But what we've talked with the leadership, especially at the high school, is if this were to happen, how can we support both you as well as the others as well? Give them a space as well. And again, the conditions for this and our support is just peacefully doing it, no undue disruption, and we'll work to make that happen.
I think that's actually the teachable moment that I was looking towards when I asked that question, is the fact that there's a right way and a wrong way, or a positive and a not so positive way to proceed, no matter which side of the fence you fall on any issue.
Yeah.
And it's doing it in the right, respectful way, and trying to get people to a point of dialogue, that they can ask questions, they can state their position without fear of being ostracized on either one side or the other. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to know that there's at least some opportunity there for both sides to have an area that's safe.
Absolutely. And we'll start maybe John's questions, and then we'll come back to you, Becky. Is that all right? And John is going to read the questions, and if he feels it's a question that is best for him to answer.
All right, I outrank John. I'm going to quickly jump in and
Yep.
ask a quick
Sorry.
question. Just a point of clarification on the elementary school. You said parents can come, pull their kids out as they would if they were going to the dentist or whatever. And then did you say that there's going to be a space at the elementary school for them to demonstrate? There is.
Yeah.
At each building?
Yeah. So yeah, what we're doing is we're creating a space that's kind of outside, like all the other schools, where they can go, because with all the buildings, we're trying not to disrupt what's happening on the inside, but give space. We talked about originally, again, these plans have continued to evolve, and they may have to Wednesday, asking people who come up to go, they could go to the high school. Yeah, parents can take their kids. Yeah, parents can take their kids anywhere, or off campus. But we thought, again, if we're talking about keeping the kids safe, we would rather have the kids and the families away from any kind of busy roads. So we're kind of inviting them to have a space on those grounds.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
You do jump, John.
And that is one of our questions about, is parental permission required for a student to participate in a walkout during the school day? So I don't know if you want to review what we're doing with our 6th through 12th graders.
Yeah, the 6th through 12th grade, there's not parental permission. That's where we drew the dividing line. At the elementary level, we have asked our parents to come up. We also, my communication with faculty is going to be, if you hear children that are talking about it and are interested in it, kind of process the why behind it. I try to do that with high school students. Some know quite a bit about it. They can speak to the federal and state legislation being proposed. Some think it's a day just related to safety, and they're just, obviously they're tired and worried about guns in schools. So trying to working with the younger students on processing what that why would be, and then if the student's talking about it, and then reaching out to the parents to tell them what the student was interested in. And again, if we need to respond to individual students in different ways, then we'll do that. But we do want parents to know, just from a safety standpoint, especially at the younger levels, if their children are walking out. Again, we feel like the middle school students, while there might be some that join just because people are walking, most of them are going out with a reason and for a purpose. And just feel with the younger levels that if we hear that's being done, or that there's an interest there, that we need to reach out to the families.
We have another walkout question. Could the walkout be held at 12 noon, since March 14th is an early dismissal day at the high school, so that a shortened school day is not interrupted and there is no impact on attendance funding?
Absolutely it could. The students are the one who organized it and initiated it. If they wanted to organize it for a different time, the national walkout, if you don't know, if you go on the website, it's scheduled for 10 a.m. So while some people have maybe looked to do things a little bit differently or different times, 10 a.m. is the time. The children could definitely, and it's something that could be And it may actually have been, brought up to them, but yeah, they could do it at that time.
Thank you. So when you go to the website that gives like the national, Bristol Elementary School is scheduled and RSVP'd as a walkout space, and I know that we had different policies on the elementary school. Is there, so because we have multiple elementary schools, are they all under, I want to know like more information as far as concerned, because the Webster Groves High School is RSVP'd and scheduled and it's official, but the Bristol Elementary School wasn't supposed to be. However, it's on here. I wanted to know more information on that.
So I didn't know Bristol Elementary was scheduled, so that's news to me. Anybody can go on, any of you can go on anywhere and you can schedule a walkout for a school. There's no endorsement, there's no background, there's nothing. Any of you can go on, pick the school you want, and you can create it. So I will get on there later and see, it may have been organized by a student, it may have been organized by a parent. I don't know, but I hadn't heard about any student-initiated, organized group there. I had heard of some parents. Yeah, and I have a kid there. There's a little activist. She didn't know about it. She may now. She may be the person. I don't know.
Dr. Simpson, I think the question is especially about the noontime thing. I think that speaks more to the fact that we can only do so much to try to help guide what's being done, and you can't really get into the point where you're almost scheduling the organization part. That steps more into the line of the area that I don't think we want to get into.
Yeah, that gets in more the area of the advocacy for that. Also noon, one of the things with noon would be you'd have a lot of pickup. You'd have kids that wouldn't be able to participate because they were gone or different scenarios.
And cars coming and going.
Cars, but the students could certainly create that opportunity.
So related, can we make sure that this is communicated clearly to all parents, Tuesday night or something, to send out another notice from the principal of each school, exactly what's happening and where, and to tell people Bristol is for students and parents, it's not for the general public.
Yeah, and we'll think about how to communicate that, how to communicate more. We're not communicating everything because, again, we want to keep the kids safe, but we can definitely push out something again tomorrow to families. Yeah, we can do that. Mm-hmm.
Another question we have is how young do elementary schools conduct intruder drills and why are they doing it? I'll go ahead and answer that. We do it at every level. We're going to make sure that it's age appropriate based on the grade level of the child. I mean, we do it all the way from Walter Ambrose to our 12th graders at the high school. And again, we're going to make sure it's something that the students can understand and get. For instance, one of our kindergartner teachers talks about, there may be sometimes where there's a dangerous animal and we have to protect you from that dangerous animal. So there might be some times where we might have to hide from the animal, or we might run from the animal, or we might have to do other things. So, they're going to make sure it's at a level and in a way that our students can understand. And why are we doing it? I mean, I wish we didn't have to do it, but unfortunately we learned that these incidents can take place in houses of worship, at concerts, and stores, and unfortunately in 2012 we learned that it can happen at elementary schools with Sandy Hook. So we want to make sure that our students are as safe as they can be while they're with our care. And on that, I just want to recognize Captain Spear from the Webster Groves Police Department. He has been instrumental in developing a program that most county school districts have used in terms of training staff and training students. So we appreciate it.
I wonder if it's appropriate if the police officers present have any comments they'd like to offer at this point.
Gentlemen, Chief Curtis, Captain Spears.
Captain Spears can speak to the training. He's the Drew.
He is.
In reference to training, we actually started teaching intruder training in 2009 for our civilians. We've been teaching something for law enforcement response since right after Columbine. We changed our old process, but we try to figure out a way we can partner with the civilian groups, but whether it be churches, schools, whatever, and try to teach them some survival skills that will keep them alive long enough for us to get there. And that's the whole idea. And then basically, that training incorporates two things: what they need to do while we're coming, and then what to do when we get there. So we all are operating basically from the same playbook. In 2012, there was a change in Missouri law, some of you all know, where they started mandating intruder training, as well as having law enforcement there to review the intruder plans. And so myself and a few county officers actually developed a plan that kind of built off of that. And so it's all based off the run, hide, fight. There's really nothing super secret about it. But the training, I'm not going to get too much into your schedule because that's not my area, but as far as the training itself, it's designed to make sure the staff's aware of what your policy, whatever it is you developed is, to give them a chance to employ it in controlled circumstances, and at the same time allow law enforcement to be there too, so we're all kind of working from the same playbook. That answers all the questions.
John, did you have more?
No, those were the only questions that I've been given.
Becky?
Yeah, I'm just curious since the walkout is potentially will happen at the 6th through 12th grade level, and you talked about a safe space for the students to go to, what does that look like? I'm sure it's got to be different for a 6th grader to leave a classroom, or are they guided out of a classroom compared to a space where the high schoolers, where do they go? How does that look? And I know you talk a lot about the safety, keep them safe during that time in that space. What does that space mean?
Yeah.
Or can you not disclose that? I don't know.
I don't want to disclose where all the locations are going to be, but they're going to be, on the grounds of the school. Kids are not going to be leaving campus, but the faculty are in place to kind of, especially with Steger and Hickson, to help direct the kids, kind of guide the kids to where they're going. The high school is a very well organized machine. So that's what we'll do. Like when I speak with Grace and Howard, just talking about, and again, there's not too much chatter there right now, but just having faculty in place throughout the building that's guiding them out to the space together, and just supporting them there. And again, empowering the adults if there's a scenario, a situation where they don't feel, I'm not anticipating anything, but if they don't feel it's good to walk outside or they have any kind of discomfort, bring them back in. Yeah. Dave?
Yeah. John, I agree with you about 99.9% of the time. That's early tonight. And this is just me talking. There are different cities and school districts that are handling this in different ways. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. But the one that appealed to me the most, and to my grandson, who's in 3rd grade at Bristol, was where it was unity and solidarity of the entire community and parents and teachers who were killed at Parkland, not just kids, coming together like around Selma Field, holding hands in unity for 17 minutes to honor the 17 fallen dead at Parkland. And I just think symbolically, that's great. And my comment about the safety issue, I hear you on that, but it's like at Bristol, we have the Bristol Blacktop, we have Fall Festival, we have Webster on Wheels, we have kids leaving school every day to party or playing recess on the playground. And, you can't protect everybody 24/7. I mean, life is a risk. But you can be smart about it. But I just like the idea of the community as one coming together to honor the people who died.
Thank you. Anyone else? It's certainly not a speak now, forever hold your peace. If you ever want to reach out, you can call me, email me, John and Thomas. In a small district this size, all the leadership team wears many, many hats in comparison to bigger school systems. And he does a really good job overseeing this, working with Bruce and the facilities folks on safe facilities. And I appreciate all your efforts, and reach out to us. I left my cards back there if you want to grab one and reach out anytime. Pat?
John, If I understood you correctly, at the high school level, parents and community are not invited to participate. Are they invited to participate at Hickson, Stever, and what is the difference between the elementary schools where parents will go, withdraw their children from school and participate?
Yeah, we are not allowing participation at Steger, Hickson, or the high school for the adults. At the younger levels, we felt, again, there has to be, we had to create some kind of, I felt there had to be some type of line, a developmental type of line. Certainly we have some 10-year-olds who may be more mature than some 14-year-olds, or some 8-year-olds who know about the tragedy that occurred, and possibly some 14-year-olds who do not, but felt that at the younger levels, if they were going to walk out, again, thinking through, this day is about gun legislation. It's very explicit. And just feeling like if students were walking out again, what's their why? And just feeling like with the younger kids, we just wanted a parent involved with them to make that choice, help make that choice for them, with them, as opposed to at the upper levels.
And a follow-up question, if I may. How is the community going to be informed that they are not to come to Steger, Hickson, and the high school? I'm talking not just about family members or parents, but the larger community who may be interested in knowing that this is happening on the 14th at 10 a.m. and might want to avail themselves of an opportunity too.
Yeah, we haven't put it on Facebook yet. We've communicated with all the families. Again, we have felt like trying not to draw enough of the attention to it ourselves to invite that. So right now there are no plans to say don't come, because we're not also saying come. But again, administration, people, we're going to have law enforcement, that if people show up, we'll be able to support that. So, Alyssa, you had...
I just want to mention there's also a march on Saturday, March 24th, that parents and other community members that care about this issue, they can do whatever they want with their kids and the community on that day. This is a different thing that's targeted, and as I understand it, was organized by the kids at that school in Parkland.
Alyssa?
Not about the protesters who walk out. My question is about guns in schools. I just want to make sure I have a very clear understanding. Do any of our staff or faculty employed by the district have an ability or allowance to carry a gun in any of our buildings?
Our board policy clearly states that the only people who can carry firearms on our campus are law enforcement.
We have signs outside all the schools too that say you can't.
Yeah, I remember when this went up tied to the last legislation.
Yeah.
And then I had heard rumblings that my perception was incorrect. So I just wanted to.
Yeah. Mr. Budd?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, just like the last board meeting, John made a great presentation on school safety and stuff. You sent out an email on school safety to the district community, and then what? 2 or 3 days after that, you sent out an email, I guess just to Bristol parents, about the situation happened in Bristol, that a strange man came in the side door, walked down all the way to the office. He was, I guess, encountered by a teacher who, I guess, explained to him something, and the guy ended up leaving. But the point is, a strange man, and nobody knew, he wasn't a parent, got him to the side door. So the fact is, there's a lot of things that need to be improved and changed, because that was a break in security.
Yeah, and we just for clarity, we don't know that, it might have been a parent. We don't know that for sure, but one of the electronics, so at the doors have locks, they have locking mechanisms, the push bars, I can't remember what they're called, and then they also have swipe cards on some of the locks in the schools. And that was one where the swipe card electronic system was a little temperamental. And because we sat there and we pushed and we're trying to figure it out, and it kept kept locking, and one time it remained open. And so we had the door fixed within an hour. Again, the police were there really quickly. Yeah, we don't know. It could have been a parent. They came in looking for Adventure Club. And we said, it's not here. It's at Walter Ambrose. And he went out. He went back out the same door that he came in. But we thought in abundance of safety and security that we would contact the police, notify families what had occurred, but never was there, did we feel like there was a threat or anything like that. But you're right, but it was a situation. That's one thing that we talk about is there are things that we can do to respond, but then as we look at the baseline or the fundamental things, just making sure our systems, our doors, our windows, our intercoms, everything are working. If they're not, how do we fix them as quickly as we can? Okay, my cards are back there if anybody wants one. Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right, perhaps redundantly, we now have our second opportunity for public comments. Oh, or not. Mr. Buck.
No, this is a good one. The happy one. I think your next meeting is April the 9th. The election is April the 3rd. I can't be there for April the 9th. So I wanted to make some comments to Gene and to Emerson tonight, and not just the opportunity. First of all, beyond being a board member, I just want to say you two are like two outstanding human beings, and I'm really proud and lucky to know you and to call you a friend. I next want to share the first lines of one of my favorite quotes from President Theodore Roosevelt. It was titled "The Man in the Arena," and it starts out, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out another man's stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena." And I got to tell you, I've never had the courage to put my hat in the ring. But the fact is you all have, and you have done it admirably, greatly, and that deserves and demands not only my respect, but everybody's respect. Gene, here's the things that I really like about you. One is that you always seem to be smiling. Two, and this was very much like my mom, so it hits home with me. My sense is you always look for the good in people and things first. And you may have a negative comment or critical comment later, but you always look for the good first. And the third thing is that you, I think more than anybody else, are the voice of the student. I think you are always commenting from the voice of the student, and I love that. And Emerson, you're a business guy. I was in business. And so I admire and respect this in you, is that instead of getting caught up in theory or intellectual heavy discussion, you have a way of getting down to the bottom line. Common sense, straight talk, and I can understand every word you say, and I really appreciate that. The other big thing about you, Emerson, that obviously goes without saying, is that you bring real diversity to the board. You live in North Webster, it's been your home for a long time, and like Gene being a voice for all students, I think you are a needed, and have been a needed voice for African American kids and issues like achievement gap. I know those things are really, really important to you, and I just want to tell you that I really appreciate it. The last two things is that, you know, Keita and Christine are going to be two good additions to the board when you all leave. But I got to tell you, I think this board and our community is going to miss you guys desperately and sincerely. And my hat is off to both of you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Dave. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion that we approve consent agenda items 8.02, 8.03, 8.04, 8.05, 8.06.
All
Second.
those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, for the second time this evening and in my tenure with board president, I'm going to exercise my power and propose that we table our second executive session discussion because I think it's going to take some time and consideration and it's been a long evening. And I'm reluctant to start this discussion at 9 p.m. So we will fit it into, if nobody has any serious objections, we'll fit it into the next meeting. Is that okay? Okay, we'll still have our current board members on. I'm sorry.
No, I just.
Okay. All right, in that case, you know what to do.
I would make a motion we adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.